Welcome to another Gryphon Insight. My name is Shane Stanton and I have been working with the Gryphon partners for over 10 years. Today, I introduce residential mortgage-backed securities, or RMBS, which form the vast majority of the GCI portfolio. Let's start by reminding ourselves how banks actually make money. They source funding at a low interest rate, example borrow at 1%, and lend money at a high interest rate, example home loans at 3%. So what are banks' funding sources? Each source of funding for a bank is a corresponding source of investment for the person providing that funding. The 6 main funding sources for a bank represent 6 different types of investment from a risk-return perspective for the global investors providing the funding. Different investors obviously have different risk-return requirements, and so utilising all 6 funding sources therefore gives the bank access to a larger global investor base, which helps it satisfy its very large funding needs. One of these 6 funding sources is secured bonds, which means that the bank's promise to repay principal and interest to the investor is additionally secured by specific set-aside collateral. RMBS bonds are secured bonds, where the security is home loans, i.e. the collateral is essentially a specific group of residential houses. And we'll return to this shortly. Apart from providing funding diversity, issuing RMBS may also provide banks with a cheap funding source, as well as capital relief, i.e. it reduces their home loan exposure and so correspondingly reduces the amount of capital that the government requires it to hold against future potential doomsday scenario home loan losses. Any large institutions providing home loans can issue RMBS. In Australia, it's primarily the major banks, other big banks, and some large specialist home loan providers. The bank will set aside a diversified mix of $1 billion of its home loans to use as security for $1 billion of RMBS bonds it issues to investors. The home loans will be diversified by many factors, including geography, loan balance, dwelling type, LVR, and interest rate. In this example, the collateral for the $1 billion of RMBS bonds will be the circa $1.7 billion of Australian houses which were purchased with the $1 billion of set-aside home loans. Here, the $1 billion of RMBS bonds are broken down into 6 different risk-return categories, where the risk of each RMBS bond is measured by its credit rating. 95% or $950 million are the safest AAA rating, which are purchased by large international investors. The interest rate on these at the time of this video is less than 1%. The other 5 credit ratings indicate slightly higher levels of risk and hence higher interest rates for investors. By any objective measure, even the RMBS bonds with the highest interest rates remain very low risk. To see why no Australian RMBS bond has ever suffered a single dollar of loss, we need to understand how home loan principal and interest repayments flow through to RMBS investors, and then also consider RMBS investor protections. Each month, homeowners continue to pay their home loan interest and principal to the bank. The bank uses the interest to first pay the RMBS bond investors who invested in the AAA rated bonds, then the interest on the next highest rated bonds, and so on until all interest due to the RMBS bond investors have been paid. And only then does the bank receive that month's excess interest. That is, the bank's profit for these $1 billion of home loans is drip fed to the bank on a monthly basis. But if and only if all RMBS bond investors have received their full interest payments up to and including that month. And this is an important alignment of interest between the bank and the bondholders. In this example, even the most risky RMBS bond would continue to receive its monthly interest repayments even if more than 40% of homeowners made no interest repayments. Now, any homeowner principal payments received must be used by the bank to repay corresponding amounts of the $1 billion of RMBS bond principal, i.e. the balance of RMBS bonds outstanding always equals the balance of the home loans securing the RMBS. So in summary, RMBS bonds are secured bonds issued by banks and non-banks, purchased by global investors, including banks, super funds and large money managers, backed by large numbers of residential home loans, and are issued at different risk levels with different interest rates. To date, no Australian RMBS bond has ever suffered a single dollar of loss when held to maturity. This is due to 4 major protections for RMBS bond investors. And this is a topic for another Gryphon Insight video. Thank you for watching. Investor engagement is important to Gryphon, and providing a simplified introduction to RMBS is an important part of that investor education process.